Ken Crosson is a legend in New Zealand architecture circles, having won almost every award possible under the sun, including being nominated for one of the best 400 houses in the world. But he's got a surprising analogue secret about his life and practice.
And I open up my diary every morning and I'm kind of surprised what I've got happening that day and the next day.
Ideally, for all of us, we find an elevated state in our work, and purpose and meaning, if we can connect those things up, makes such a huge difference for us.
Architecture is about changing people's worlds. It's actually something much, much bigger than just drawing house plans.
Like many that hail from rural stocks, Ken's original plan was to go onto the farm, but a chance encounter with some legends of New Zealand architecture painted a different picture for Ken.
It was an inspirational feeling going into that space. And we'd been lambing and there'd been storm after storm and it was cold and, for 3 weeks it wasn't pleasant on the farm. And I thought, sitting in a nice warm office, creating spaces like this, that's the dream job.
Ken has some interesting views to share on where standards have landed in New Zealand.
In my fourth year at school, 40% of the class was failed. Start that year again.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen now. Everybody gets through.
Over the years, Ken has had a range of different business partners, but a very intentioned journey led him down a path that he didn't necessarily consider at the outset.
The skill set, the personality, the help, all those things you look for in a partner. And they just arrived, What was quite interesting, and, this is the value of a good recruiter. The person that I thought I needed.
Kenny Crosson, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Josh. Pleasure to be here.
Absolute pleasure to have you. 15 years of friendship, and this is the first opportunity to have this kind of dialogue, although I feel like I know you super well, and I'm looking forward to helping you explain your life story to the audience. But I'm going to start with something which is like a critical point in time in your business is happening next year. So Crosson and Co. And its various derivatives of existence will be turning 40 next year.
Shocking.
It's right. It's a remarkable milestone, but also one that we classically associate with people going through a midlife crisis. Now, as a human, what that means is that you might go and buy a sports car, get a tattoo, go and have an affair. How does a business, when it turns 40, go through its midlife crisis?
Well, I think you're a year ahead, but yeah, we'll try that next year. Well, I've got the sports car, so I don't need to do that. Not intending to have an affair. And so, I'm pretty comfortable with life generally, actually. The big momentous thing that's happened to me in the last couple of months is I've become a grandfather.
Congratulations.
And that's a life change.
Amazing.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So you're famously not digital. People joke about it as Ken being up with the technology because he's using email now. So I wondered if it maybe the 40th celebration could be to buy a new computer for the firm.
Well, I can tell you that the firm is actually fully computed and we've just done a series of new upgrades. But yes, very proudly, I've still got my paper diary and I've still got, my pencil and, I kind of insert it manually every day.
Yes.
And I open up my diary every morning and I'm kind of surprised what I've got happening that day and the next day.
Yeah, there's got to be something which is probably quite cognitively and stress-wise quite good for you to not have it, because, we have it all on our phones these days, and that means that you're always aware of what's going on and around you, and you're booking appointments, and you're, focusing on the next thing. And that adds to a cognitive load and a stress kind of situation. Whereas if you don't know, because it's sitting at the office, you're just going to go to the office that day, you open up, and you kind of go, oh, I'm doing some work today.
And it has its negatives, I have to say. I think there's a frustration with some of the people around me. In particular, my dearest, and she is always wondering what I'm doing. And I have to say, well, I have to go to the diary and find out what I'm actually doing today, or this evening, or later on in the week.
Yes.
So it's not without its frustrations.
Yeah.
But look, I'm an adopter of technology where it's necessary. But, that personal communication, the organization of my life, I've really found that I haven't needed it. And I still manually put my timesheets in, quite frustratingly. But, it's just one of these things that you have to do. And, I've started 40 years ago and I may change. Maybe I will next year.
Yeah, let's see. I'll look forward to hearing about that. But you almost didn't become an architect and, one of New Zealand's most recognised architects. I can say that. You can't say that about yourself, and we'll unpack that as we go. But you were going to become a farmer at the start of your life. What was the moment that changed for you that you decided that perhaps going into the family business wasn't the right one for you?
Yeah, good question. As you say, I grew up on a farm in mid-Canterbury. We're one of 6 boys and, a loving mum and a very kind of inspirational, directional father. And I thought I was going to be a farmer. And we all had jobs. We were workers on the farm. And my job was milking the cow. I had a cow. I thought I was going to be a dairy farmer.
One cow.
One cow. We had a house cow. The manual discussion that we've just had, I milked a cow every morning and every night. And that was just my job. And I thought I'd extend that and become, perhaps a dairy farmer. I well remember the pivot, and I was 16, and I'd always been interested in houses, house designs, and that sort of thing. And thinking that architecture was just drawing house plans
Hmm.
and not really understanding architecture is about changing people's worlds. It's actually something much, much bigger than just drawing house plans. And so there was a careers day in Christchurch, and I thought I'd go. And we went to a quantity surveyor's office, we went to an engineer's office, we went to an architect's office. But the moment was going to the Christchurch Town Hall. It had just been built, just opened. And Miles Warren the architect, had a series of his watercolors inside it. And I remember these beautiful marble floors, the richness of the timberwork, the trusses, the structure, the warmth, and it moved me. It was an inspirational feeling going into that space. And we'd been lambing and it'd been storm after storm and it was cold and, for 3 weeks it wasn't pleasant on the farm. And I thought, sitting in a nice warm office, creating spaces like this, that's the dream job. And so, we the next year we finished school. Very small country school. There were 7 of us in the 7th form, and went to Auckland University, did my intermediate year, and very fortunately, the year after, got in, and got into the School of Architecture. And that was it. That was the shift, and that was the change. And how fabulous! What a great career. And I still love what I do. I still love working. I still love going to the office. I still love doodling, and I still love kind of talking to people.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of things. As you know, I hail from rural stock, and I know one of the challenges that they have in that world today is appealing to the kids, appealing to the younger generation to stay on the farm and work on the farm and take over the farm. And we've had a lot of conversion of big properties in New Zealand to carbon forestry. And in the Hawke's Bay with my family recently, and the consequence of that, we don't think about it as city dwellers, is that those small towns are actually getting destroyed because you plant the crop and then you leave and you don't basically do anything with it for about 40 years. Whereas if you're running stock or growing crops, then you're constantly there's an economy that has to exist around that. It's the next death knell of those small towns. But there's also a marketing problem that these, I think, institutions can have as well, which is why this is something special, why this is unique, and what the opportunity is for people over time. So that wasn't perhaps as much the case over 40 years ago when you made the decision. But how did your family respond to you saying, I'm going to go to the big city and I'm going to be someone who's responsible for creating spaces and helping people, live in something more beautiful?
Hmm. Look, I think the farming industry, the profession of farming, and it's a tricky proposition. You've got to be a businessman, you've got to be an agrarian, you've got to know so many skills. Has been changing, and it was changing back then. And one of the things that I did reflect on when I decided to go into architecture, it seemed like the farm, you were never in control. It was always overseas markets. It was always the weather. It was always politics. And it was a tricky business back then. And since then, we've seen the evolution of technology a lot. The farms have got bigger, And so there was, and the families got smaller. So I think the villages, the small towns, the rural towns in New Zealand have been getting lesser and lesser populated for the last 50 years. And I'm interested to know what AI is going to do, because that is going to have an effect as well.
So it's, in other words, it's not your fault that the small towns of New Zealand are dying.
Look, I hadn't actually put that on my shoulders, but
I
thanks
just thought
for
I'd throw it out
reinforcing
there
that. Yeah,
for
yeah.
consideration. But
Yeah.
your family was supportive of your decision?
Totally,
Yeah,
totally.
okay, great.
My family are, very broad and love the idea that, there was another direction, another opportunity, and was totally supportive. And, I was the first one in the family to go to university.
Hey, it's Josh. Thanks for being part of the show. Most founders don't just build one thing. They build many. The company, the team, and hopefully the legacy. JB Ware in New Zealand understands that your exit isn't an ending. It's the bridge to what you build next. Whether that's backing the next generation, funding what matters, or creating impact that compounds across decades. The best exits aren't measured in commas alone. They're measured in what those commas enable. 2 Commas is proudly partnered with JB Ware, building wealth that works as hard as you do.
And then, now they've all gone to university sort of thing. But so it was new, it was different. The big city was, massive. And it was a massive adjustment for me. I was incredibly homesick. I almost didn't last the distance. My first month, I came from a big loving family, small town, small school, thrust into the middle of Auckland, and kind of anonymous. And so, the first term was very tricky. And I thought, no, I'm going to be a farmer. And then, just decided to kind of stick out the year. And by the end of the year, I loved it. I'm totally urban. I love what the city, some people say the greatest invention ever, but what the city can do for you, what it can do for innovation, what it can do for entrepreneurs, what it can do for lifestyles, culture. So I'm an urban dweller with no excuses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alain de Botton wrote a book called The Architecture of Happiness. Is that something you're familiar with, the title?
I've read it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said to me about the opportunity seeing Warren, I think it was Warren and Marnie as the
Warren and
architecture
Marnie,
firm.
yes,
Yep.
yes.
I watched a wonderful documentary
Yes.
on their work.
Isn't that remarkable?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And particularly the Christchurch Town Hall.
The town hall.
Yep.
Well, that was the building
Yeah,
that I was
okay.
describing. Yes.
Got it.
That's
Yeah,
it.
unbelievable, beautiful structure.
That nearly got pulled down
Yes, it did after the earthquake.
after the earthquake.
Yeah, that was the point of the documentary.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. So you, at that outset of your deciding to pick the career, realized that there was an elevated state opportunity, because you said that you went into it with the view of, before having had that exposure of it being designing houses and angles and roofing and all that sort of stuff,
And more technical.
and then you realize that there was this kind of elevated opportunity. To what extent do you think that having that early perspective on things was influential in how you went about navigating your way through your career as an architect?
I think very influential. And there's some other things that have been very influential as well, in terms of that idea and that attitude to design. And that is the fact that I was at the School of Architecture in the late 70s. Hard to believe, I know, but as you said, I've already been in practice for 40 years. And we had some extraordinary architects there. And the way of learning was sitting alongside these guys and understanding the way they operated and the way they designed buildings and spaces and environments and communities. And look, I could stand on toes now, but I'm not sure that we've got that skill set in there at the moment. And I see our universities about output and not about quality. Maybe that's a little bit controversial, but in my fourth year at school, 40% of the class was failed. Start that year again.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen now. Everybody gets through. And I think to our detriment, and I think if I'm talking about architecture to the built environment's detriment. But I could swing that wider and say perhaps a lot of academia is not quite the quality that it once was.
Mm.
But I don't want to go there.
Yeah, yeah. It's a risky segue for us to take,
Yeah,
but I think that there's that balance that one needs to strike as you get older to realize that times are a-changing. That's just the nature of things, and obviously they're changing far more rapidly now than they were historically. And we have the benefit of perspective, you more so than me, as you are more mature by years than I am.
I'm older.
You're older.
I don't know about more
cool. I
mature.
didn't want to use the O word, but you have. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so you've got this. The world has this inevitable and voracious pull towards complexity. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with this theory, but if you subscribe to the fact that the universe and the universes are ever expanding, which is the Big Bang theory, so they're ever growing. And
I subscribe to that.
Okay, cool. So what that means is that the universe and everything around us is building in complexity. And we have this pull as a species towards complexity. And it's one of the things that you have to consciously fight, especially as you get a bit older. And sometimes you just ignore it because, new things are hard to learn. And so you just, walk away from that thing.
Stick with your diary.
Stick with your paper diary, exactly. A form of resistance. But if it still works for you, just not your partner, then that's one form of resistance. But then the other is to go, don't let your life get over complex as well. But what you've talked about just there is the nature of the education environment and what's being produced in the world. What if that were true, what consequences is that having upon the experience that we are having with the buildings that we are that are kind of the modern building that's coming out?
Yeah. Look, I don't want to actually just lay it down at the feet of designers because there's a whole lot of things in the mix. Politics, attitudes, this she'll be right attitude, and you only know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. And so I don't think our education system from school teaches us so much about the quality of the built environment and how it affects you. It was Winston Churchill that said, we shape our houses thereafter. We build our houses thereafter they build us, or something like that. A great quote about, from Winston Churchill. Yeah. That the quality of the built environment is so, so important. And it's not being reflected in our attitudes to what we're building in terms of schools, in terms of hospitals, in terms of our houses in our cities, unfortunately. And, that's our, perhaps our developer model. It's kind of, perhaps not the checks and balances that we need to have in there. So I think it's a complex problem. And I think there's a number of aspects that we need to actually corral and talk about. And I don't think we do enough of that. And maybe that kind of sheets back to our education system. Perhaps it's not as rigorous as it once was, whether it's at school, whether it's at university, or whether it's actually the debates we have in the community.
Yeah, I remember when I went through university, which was in the early 90s. It was not a business as such in its own right as it is today. And it was funded, which was wonderful. Thank you, New Zealand government and taxpayer, for funding me through university my first year. Then thereafter it was paid for. But now it is very much run as a business. And it's the US model, right?
It is, yeah. It's funded by output. So you get funded by the number of people that go through. And also it's a commodity now. You're competing against the universities of the world.
Yeah.
And now I suspect you're competing against AI.
Yes.
And I suspect you get it, online and all. Like it's complex, but it's a business, and I think that's a problem for aspiration. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so let's go back to those early days of Crosson and Co, and we'll pick up on some of those other items as we go. But 1987 was famously the stock market crash. So Black Monday happened in October. Can't remember the exact date of that year. So what did the early years of your practice look like? When did you hire your first person? And how did you convince them that coming to work with you in your 20s, yes, as a young aspiring architect without
I was
all the
actually
awards.
in my 30s, but
You're in your 30s.
yeah,
Okay.
I'd done my OE and I'd worked in London and worked around and
You were still young and
traveled.
aspiring though.
Still young.
Still aspiring,
Still
possibly.
aspiring, and nothing surer.
So, yeah, what were those early emotions like, and how did you convince the first people to come
Yeah,
on the journey with you?
it's interesting. So I was working in London in the mid-80s. And then before the share market crash, of course, it was just going gangbusters
It was.
around the world.
Mm.
There was no tomorrow, and shares were going up. Everybody was building, and so I had a work permit that couldn't be extended, but I didn't want to extend it. I always knew I'd come back to New Zealand, and it was going, swimmingly. And I thought, well, perfect. I always wanted to set up on my own. I wasn't as good an employer as I was, a lone ranger, perhaps. And so, and also, perhaps there's an element of control in there, but I don't want to overstress that as well. But I wanted to set up on my own. So I came back, beginning of 87, and some friends who were also in London, had found some office space. So we just shared office space for a while. And then lucky to have a few family projects, like small extensions. One, my mother's cousin's house. And that was enough to just salt it and to start it. And then one project leads to another. And yeah, I convinced a young man, Brett, to come on board. He was 17. He was an extraordinary young man. And he stayed with me for 20 years, and did the technology in the office. And yeah, it worked incredibly well. He was the technical guy and I was kind of the design guy. And then we just kind of slowly added people as we needed to. And so, and the practice has evolved over the last 39 years to what we are today.
The early motions with my first business, I opened the doors and had a good reputation out in the world. But when you're a startup, especially in that space in those days, which was a non-funded startup, I bootstrapped, the ability to recruit talent is hard. And so it sounds like you did what I did. So I went and found raw talent, nascent talent,
Yes.
that I hoped that I would be able to
that word.
spot. Yeah. And then form and shape and mold those people with their, contribution to that as well. And so, the great thing is, with that in mind, that what you do is you get to help form someone into the shape of the thing, the capability set that you think is the right one for the business and for the world. That's the upside. The downside is that they're raw, and there's a lot of time and investment that has to go into those people. Have you sustained that model throughout the course of the business, or have you now, over the 39 years, gone out and been able to recruit much more senior talent? And what's the difference between those two if you have done the latter?
Yeah. There's a lot of a massive learning curve as you take somebody on that's incredibly junior. And, we have an obligation to do that as well. So we've done that, throughout my working life. We've often taken on graduates. But yes, recently we've just taken on a new business partner, and he came from a very large practice and, very senior with an extraordinary broad skill set, which is different to mine. So he's just kind of slotted in. And I don't know whether it's timing or opportunity or personalities, but, all of those things come together and have made this new practice, an evolution of my old practice. Yeah. One of the things that I will say is right at the outset, when I took on Brett for a start, I was very fortunate to have a business mentor because I didn't know much about business. Like the School of Architecture taught us nothing back in the day about professional practice. And all we did is have a coffee every month and we'd talk about bottom lines, cash flows. And he was fantastic at saying, justify that expenditure. Why do you need a new that? Why are you thinking of this? What is your future workload looking like? Why don't you bring that project forward or push that back? Like all just basic stuff. And then how do you, like we are an architectural practice, but we sell time. That's all we sell. We don't have a product, a widget, that sort of thing.
I thought you sold dreams.
We do sell dreams. Yeah. There's not much money in dreams.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he kind of had this broad perspective. He was running a big international company at the time. And he actually talked to me about that side of life, which was so important. And he was one mentor. I've had lots of mentors in my life. Some know that they're mentoring me, some don't.
Right.
They're just aspirational people that I have connected with right from day one when I was a kid, people in the community, my parents' friends, that I thought, oh, I really like that part of their life. Right through business, professional, and personal, So mentors has been a really big part of my journey, to the point where I became a mentor for the I Have a Dream program, where, are you familiar with the I Have a Dream?
Not enough to,
No.
articulate.
So, it's a program that started off in America, was brought to New Zealand, and Decile 1 children from intermediate school are paired up with a person to take them through high school. And so we run alongside these people for 6 or 7 years. And, I'm sure I got way more out of it than Moana did, but, it was just a relationship that we had, where we just talked. And, he had somebody on his side and,
It's like the big buddy, big brother
Yep,
kind of
yep.
similar thing.
It's very similar.
Yeah, love
And
it.
what an extraordinary program. And so this was the pilot that was done in Mount Roskill, and now Scott and Mary, the couple that actually run it, have expanded it into Whangarei, to the Hut, in Auckland. So, and remarkable people, remarkable.
Nearly everyone that I have that sits in this chair acknowledges either vociferously, like you have just now, the value and benefit of having mentors, or they allude to having had experienced or wise people that are around them. You mentioned we were talking about the paradigm of needing to hire inexperienced people at the start of a business because you have no reputation, and they essentially, as the employee, have to assume the risk. What's going on right now, you mentioned AI twice, is that in the US, graduate employment in the last 12 months is down about 33%. It's because the junior jobs are now getting pushed out to the robots, right? And I'm not blaming anyone for doing that because I'm doing it in my business and in my life.
Yeah.
But the consequence is, if we play this out, if this happens into the future, is that you could look at this through two lenses, right? The brightest and the best are still getting jobs, and the people that are perhaps not as employable as they could have been compared to the others are not. Well, then you go, well, that's just natural selection, right? That's Darwinism playing out and killing careers, as opposed to people dying. So that's one side of it. So they perhaps should never have been in there otherwise. But the other side of it, of course, is if you play this out into the 2 to 5 years, I call them grad pluses, and it's what a lot of businesses are populated by at the middle level of their business. So not many businesses, I've got to say, see the responsibility that you have, that you've taken on to go, we're a firm, we're a business, we're successful. We have to hire some graduates every now and then to play our part in building, growing other people. They view it as being a hassle. And it can be, but then you're ignoring your part in the system. But what people do like to hire is the grad plus. So that's the grad with 2 to 5 years of experience. They've had the edges rounded off. They know how to play in a team. They know how to send emails. They've got some, decorum, hopefully, those sorts of things, right? And so if you play this out into the future, that's the big hole that people are predicting is going to pop up as a consequence of low-level jobs being automated.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
So I'm going to pick up AI later on, but I wanted to see that here now. So at what stage, because you've had partners in the firm at varying times, and so at what stage and who was the first person that you incepted that conversation with, and how did you know they were the right person to get into a partnership with?
Um, I think there's a lot of things that you look at when you're talking about partnership, in particular personality, kinship, because you spend a lot of time together.
So much.
In fact, you spend more time than your life partner. And, you're making, big decisions about your life every day that you're working together. So the first partner that we took on was a guy that started as a graduate with me. And so, and he worked up, and he such a great guy, good guy. And I think partnerships evolve and change, and I don't think there's any issue about them pivoting. Businesses pivot all the time. And then that particular partnership, it was great for 20 something years, and then we just were moving in different directions. I was a little bit more interested in multi-unit and bigger projects. We'd done a lot of one-off homes. I was incredibly fortunate to, in 1999, build a batch that got a bit of recognition, built a holiday home.
It wasn't just a bit of recognition, Ken. It won House of the Year, and then it went on to win a global award as well.
Yeah. And interestingly, last week, we've just been approached by Phaidon, who want to include it in their new book of the world's best 400 houses.
Yes. That's amazing. And I knew I'd have to pick you up to get us to talk about that properly. So one of the reasons Ken is here is because he's a globally recognised, top of his profession architect.
Look, I think you can overstate it. We've had a bit of luck.
Again, I can say that, but you can't.
No,
yeah.
I won't say that.
So what is it? Luck is when preparedness and opportunity meet. That's Seneca. I'm quoting you there. So there you go. That's Seneca. So you had that opportunity that went on, 1999. And so the timing was that you were probably foreshadowing a bit of growth in the practice. Is that what went on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at that point, just getting back to the partnership. So after that, we got a lot of single family homes around the coast, around rural homes, and bigger homes. And I'd always wanted, and while I loved those, and they're a great chance to experiment and that sort of thing, I had an aspiration that we could actually be more to more people, that we could do bigger projects, terrace houses, apartments, where you could affect more people. And so, that was the direction that, we sort of diverged on. And so, while we love our single family homes and we still do them, we were actually heading more into that direction as well. And so that was a change that required a different skill set and a different mindset. And so that's what we did. And now my new partner we're doing apartments in way bigger buildings, and so he's got an extraordinary skill set in that typology. And so, the partnerships evolve. Partnerships are made to evolve. And so there's no shame in that, and that's just a broad direction change. So,
because you were CCCA, I think it was Carnahan
Crosson Clark Carnahan
architects. Yeah, when we first met 15 odd years ago, but I think it was actually just the Crosson that was still there at that stage. But it moved and it changed. Yeah. So just to be clear, and this is me picking up on the insight here, is that particularly in a professional services firm, but also in a product firm, if you're building a software product company, or if you're importing a product, or you're manufacturing a product, then there is the consideration that one should have before taking on a partner is, are we sufficiently aligned from a values standpoint? Do I like working with this person? Is there a good vibe that's there? Do we have enough complementary skills, but also different skills? Yeah. And to what extent did you get into things like, because I say to people when they're going to think about bringing on a business partner or starting a partnership with someone else, is that I say, have the conversation to get clear on the different paths that could exist at the end of the business now, so that you don't have to end up lawyering up down the path. In other words, that's represented in the shareholders agreement. So drag along, tag along rights. If we sell the company, at what stage do you have to be obliged to that? If we disagree upon something, how do we resolve that disagreement? If we want to buy some shares or sell some shares, all those types of conversations, which can feel a bit icky, because we're getting into business together. This is amazing. It's like having a relationship property agreement or a prenup for a marriage. Some people don't believe in that, so that's cool. But it means that you're just having the conversation about, should this event happen in the future, how are we going to handle it? To what extent did you do that?
We didn't.
You didn't? Okay.
We didn't, but we knew each other sufficiently well that, we had property together, we had the business together, that we could have our conversations and that we resolved a position.
Yeah. Okay.
and we resolved our position, and then we just got on. There was no lawyers, no, hard conversations.
Yes.
And that's just a mark of the respect we had for each other.
Yeah.
I think, and the relationship we had.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now let me ask a tricky question. So you brought up the C word, control word, earlier on. And as you know about me, I'm a recovering control freak.
Have you recovered?
Recovering.
Good. Yeah, I do know that actually. Yes. And in fact, I've seen it play out in the last 5 years a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The recovering bit, hopefully not the
No, the
raw
recovered.
backdrop.
Well, I'm going to say recovered actually.
Oh, thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that, having to share control with others?
Yeah, I think that's probably better answered by others, to be
Right.
perfectly honest.
Well, funnily enough, I got you wrong.
Look, it's a work in progress. It's very much a work in progress. And I haven't mastered it, to be perfectly honest. And it's a tricky one because the implications can be quite negative. So it's a work in progress. Can I just say that?
100%. And I'll dwell on it for a second. It's one of those things that makes up a personality set, obviously, and having high control typically is associated with having high accountability. Typically, if you have high control with low accountability, then you're a bit of a ineffective narcissist kind of thing. And also, it tends to align with people that are quite motivated as well. High control, high motivation. And I know you're a hard worker. You still continue to go to the office on the weekends. Last time we spoke about it. And so you still doing that? Head into the office on the weekends? Yeah.
Love it.
You can open up your laptop at home now and
Laptop?
Yeah.
I don't have a laptop, as you know, Josh.
Yeah, I leave my diary at the office and that's all I've got. And then I've got my pencils. So what I heard you say is that you got to a stage in the partnership and you realised that it had been serving us to get to this point in time, CCCA, and then you had a divergence of objectives. And that's that thing that I was talking about, that it's okay for these things to come to their natural end. And the idea is to handle the conversations elegantly, consider all viewpoints effectively, and then kind of get on with your life. Is that kind of what happened for you guys?
Yeah, that's exactly it, really. And, we still see each other around traps and we're good friends and saw each other at the theatre just a few weeks ago.
Love the theatre.
And it's all very easy.
Yeah. So it was Crosson Architects, and then a few years ago, you decided that it would be time to bring in a partner again. So what kind of got you to that stage after having been single, part of a group, as in single practicer, part of a group, and then back to single again? What got you to the stage of going,
The skill set, the personality, the help, all those things you look for in a partner. And they just arrived, what was quite interesting, and, this is the value of a good recruiter. The person that I thought I needed was not the person I ended up with. The person that I thought I needed was a senior architect to run projects. And we went out to a recruiter, and the recruiter came back and said, actually listening to you, you don't need that. You want this guy, Jerome.
Mm-hmm.
Very senior, like skill set way above where I was pitching. And, we had a number of conversations and, just the alignment was there, it was perfect. And so we took that particular skill set as opposed to a senior architect. And now he's running the business. So he actually looks after the business.
Right. He's kind of the principal.
He's the principal that, and the office manager and, the project manager and the skill set he's got is extraordinary. And he just picks the ball and runs with it. And he's, again, a crazy worker. We didn't know that at the time, but, his shoulder is to the wheel endlessly. And so is his mind. And, and it just worked. It was not what I was expecting to do, but it's been a revolution.
So what do you do?
Not a lot. Go into the office on the weekend and draw pictures.
Wave your arms around a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Pull out my pad and my pencils. And
Yes.
That's it.
Yes, perfect.
Quite simple.
Yeah. You've got a relatively unique model in the architecture space, I understand. Talk us through how you've constructed the business from a business standpoint.
So we're a small practice. We're a small number. We're a design practice. And a lot of our projects are documented outside the practice. So that's meaning, so we do the design, we get it to the point where we need a resource consent, and we take it through to that point, and then it's actually given to documentation practices, so the working drawings, the nuts and bolts. So, and we've got one of the practices that we use a lot, actually, is a small team that sits within our office. So we just work with them, and it's kind of like having your own drafting team, but we're not responsible for the financials of it. And so they sit there, and, they're a great group of guys that we just bounce off, and they do the documentation, the working drawing side, the nuts and bolts, the technical side. And that's worked really well. And it's a model that I've had for probably the last 15, 20 years. And, bigger projects as well, some of our bigger commercial stuff is, again, documented working drawings by the same process, outside consultants that actually do the nuts and bolts. And, it's actually, a lot of the big practices are doing that now, and not doing it outside the office, but outside the country. There's many drafting practices set up now in the Philippines and
Got it.
India.
Classic
and
offshoring.
Offshoring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, we were doing it fairly early just because it wasn't part of our business unit, business structure. But now, the whole world has caught on to that kind of cheaper labor and the cheaper documentation that's done elsewhere.
That's an evolution of work and evolution of practice. This is a logical opportunity for us to talk about AI. And it may not be necessarily that impactful in your specific business right now because you are the design practice. But architecture, Bill Bryson, who we are both a fan of as an author, tells me is around about 200 years old as a profession, the title architect, because before that, it would be a random array of people that could do it. So
This came from the master builders tradition,
Right.
It was actually master craftsman, master builder, yeah.
Yes.
And then it was actually separated off into,
Yes.
architecture.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I would imagine from the outside, the practice of architecture was probably pretty similar up until the advent of computers coming into the workplace and into the world, because it would have been, technical drawing and, protractors and compasses and that sort of stuff, which I actually learned at high school, by the way, showing my age.
I'll give you a job.
If you don't mind.
Come on down.
I've got some hours spare. And so then the computer came along and on the desktop, so that was a massive change. Then probably there wasn't another big change until we went to the outsourcing model. What are you thinking that the influence of AI is going to be on the architecture profession?
A great question, Josh, and it's one that we're actually confronting all the time in the office, and we're talking about, what is the impact on us specifically as, obviously the profession, but us, and how can we actually make it help us? And we are using it in a very small way. And I don't really know. I haven't actually turned my mind to the potential because I don't really know, but I know it's going to be gargantuan. It is going to be a revolution, I think. I'm on the design review committee for an East Auckland developer, and the other day we fed in the design review rules. We fed in a scheme that came through, 3-dimensional, so drawings, and it did the summary, an amazing summary in about 10 minutes. And commonly it's that summary with the written for me would have been, half a day to a day. And it was done in an hour by the time I'd refined it and put my voice into it and all the rest of it. That's one aspect. I've done some notes about urban design and, where we should be going and thinking about that. And, so you write down the points that you want to cover off, you put it into one of those ChatGPT or whatever, and then it writes, you just say, give me 500 words on that. And that is unbelievable. So, the potential is extraordinary. And now we're looking at presentation models and how we can actually do the design and then feed it into presentation. So it's short-circuiting a lot of our work. where it goes, I'm convinced it will go into the documentation and all of that. So I think, the one-off creative, the new problem solving that an architect does up front, I think we're pretty safe for a wee while because we've actually trialed design a Ken Crosson house. This is the site, this is the context, this is the aspect. What does it come up with? And it's all gobbledygook. It's not a Ken Crosson house at all. And so, look, I feel that I've got a little bit of runway until it gets to the point where it's actually solving real creative problems. But I'm not that much of a Luddite to realize that it's actually evolving so rapidly. It is going to get to that point. What that looks like, I really don't know, Josh. But it's real, and we're pondering it.
I think that's perhaps the intelligent perspective on it, is to go that the changes are likely to be massively consequential in every space that involves a computer, but also that involves repetitive work and detail work. All of those things are going to massively change. And then experimenting, trialing, having a hypothesis, rolling something out. Did it have the impact that we thought that it did? What was the impact? How effective are we now as a consequence compared to what we were doing before? And then keep on iterating and testing, which very much is what you're doing. So good for you. Another trend, another mega thing that's going on around us specifically in Auckland here right now is Plan 120. And I know that's a pet subject for you right now. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, Plan Change 120 is the Auckland City Council's future plan to increase the density in Auckland City. Now, we all agree that density must be increased in Auckland City. A dense city is a more cost-effective city. You can get good public transport. You don't spread tar seal across the city, across our green. You can get real efficiency there, and you get the energy and the entrepreneurial energy that's there as well. I mentioned the city, cities being such an important part of the development of civilization. Plan Change 120, there's many views, and it's kind of varied. And I think we've been caught by central and local government not really doing their homework. We had central government saying we must have 2 million houses in the city. Now, the potential. And it's taken 150 years to get 550. Where does 2 million come from? And then it was pulled back at the beginning of this year to 1.6 million, and now it's pulled back to 1.4 million. It's just a number that's meaningless. And so I think an approach, density is really important. Where should it go? Obviously, the arterial routes, the traffic nodes, the hubs. But we've also got to respect the city that we know and love. And I think that's the missing piece in what's been produced to date. Another way of looking at our city was not just remap it and say, this is where it's going to go because of a metric. It's got to be so close to a public transport network, or it's got to be so close to a transport hub or whatever, or the CBD. Perhaps we should have said, what is the city that we love? What do we really respect about the city? And look at things like atmosphere and materiality and form and all those things. One of the interesting things about Auckland is that it is the largest timber-housed Victorian city in the world.
Is it really?
It is, yeah. And Plan Change 120 gets rid of a whole lot of that. And so, we love our villas and bungalows and, the old houses that are weatherboard and cute and with lots of fretwork and all that sort of stuff.
It's interesting.
But a lot of, Plan Change 120 just wipes out of that. And Plan Change 120 has got densities in little suburban Victorian streets, 50 metres high, towering over a single house zone, in the middle of traditional suburbs that we love. And so there was massive opposition towards the end of last year. You would have seen all of that. And again, we got ambushed. It was notified 2 months before Christmas, and it closed before Christmas. There's an honour here that's actually, there's a value system that's actually lacking and missing. But yeah, we ended up with the wrong result. And so density is important. super important. It must be density with a quality overlay and a respect for what we've got overlay. And I don't think that happened.
Yeah. When you say we ended up with the wrong result, that being the 1.4 million, just kind of a round
Look,
big number.
I don't know why we've got to that number,
Yeah.
but let's analyze the city and what can it take?
Mm.
And it might be 1.4,
Mm.
but let's put it in the right spot as well. And the metrics that came out, A, with the number and then where it was placed, destroyed a lot of the quality that we know and love about Auckland. And so we were part of a group that was just looking at it. And we were part of a group when the unitary plan came out, probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago, I can't remember exactly, that actually looked at density. And we didn't quite get the density that we needed then. That was a first step, which was great.
I reckon 2026 is perhaps the most important year of the new millennium. This is powered through artificial intelligence. There's a tectonic shift going on in business right now, and I think you have an opportunity to capitalize on it. I've written a white paper. It's available on my website, joshcomrie.com, under the resources section, completely free of charge. And it'll give you some thinking and some resources and some how-tos in this rapidly changing world. Enjoy.
And we need to have the second step, but it's actually now analyzing what we love about the city and where it should go and scale it appropriately. You know, where I live is Ponsonby Road, and we've still got a low height on Ponsonby Road in Plan Change 120. Immediately adjacent, we've got a 50-metre height, and then we've got single houses.
And your Ponsonby Road is the arterial where the buses
which
go.
Should have the scale. And particularly because Ponsonby Road is a wide street anyway, it can really take scale. So anyway, there's lots of things and lots of ongoing discussions. But I think we've gone down a bit of a dead end.
It's interesting, all these round numbers that get plucked out. I was reading about during the Ardern administration, the 100,000, I think, Kiwi build was the name that they gave it. And the backstory was that as soon as that was uttered as a number, the supporting team behind Ardern, who was the one promoting that, are like, we can maybe do 50. And then they plucked this number out of thin air because it sounded good. And I think they delivered 800 homes under that scheme was the ultimate outcome of the 50,000 that was then made into 100,000. And so let me ask you a slightly different question, because I had Shane Brearley come on the show.
Yes.
And
what a good thing. What he's done is just extraordinary.
What an incredible individual and just a future forward-looking kind of intention, great building techniques, great integrity, generous, wonderful, wonderful human being. And so I'll ask you a similar question, but slightly different. It's hard to build in New Zealand. And this is going to be a two-part question. I'll start with the first part. Why is it hard to get things constructed in New Zealand?
Look, it's hard on lots of levels. We all know about the consenting process and the bureaucracy that sits in front of that, not behind it.
Particularly council.
Council?
Yep.
So when I built my batch, I think we had 4 drawings and a specification, which might have been 50 pages.
This was how many years ago?
This is 25 years ago. We've just done another application, the next, or still down in the Coromandel, the drawing set with all the specification and the product specs, 959 pages.
Wow.
Ludicrous.
And someone's got to read those, obviously. They probably don't. Yeah.
They don't. There's a lot of it is kind of tech support, which is not necessary. A lot of it is just protectionism, they say. And, part of it is we have got a legal system where consultants, the Leaky Building brought this up, the liability is joint and several. And that's largely been picked up by councils because they are the last people standing. The developer's gone, the builder's gone. And so the council want all this information to protect themselves. So we do need to reconsider this joint and several liability because it doesn't make any sense. Last man standing is brutally unfair. it should be responsibility. And there's other ways of dealing with that. We've still got to protect the end user, the purchaser of those houses. And so, there's insurances and there's other ways of dealing with it that we should be thinking about. So getting back to your question. Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, why is it so hard to build in New Zealand?
Yes. So bureaucracy's
Yeah.
a big thing. We're still building largely, 4x2s, a bit of lining and a bit of cladding that we built the Waitangi Treating House with.
Right. Wow. The Victorian era housing, which Auckland is full of, which we love.
There is going to be a revolution in how we build modular, repetition and that sort of thing, European model, but that has its problems as well because we're a small market at the end of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's a complexity there as well. We will be getting into, I suspect, over time, concrete molded houses, other things, AI is going to help a lot in terms of production as well. We have got lots of modular in China that we're trying to get down here. Unfortunately, that's not cheaper at the moment, partly because of our building codes and the requirements that we have to adhere to. I heard it described some time ago that building in New Zealand with our codes is a little bit like insisting that our cars have to be to the safety standards of Audis and Volvos, where a Corolla or a BYD will do.
Mm.
And I'm not sure whether that's a good analogy or not, but, I've heard it described that way. So, and we have, after the leaky homes, which was a disaster, we've, got a level of detail and protection and cost in our construction, which actually just pushes it too high. And, we've got a housing crisis where young kids can't get into homes. The dream that, we were selling our kids is, this house ownership was a big thing. And that's where simplicity and that's where,
build to rent, and that's okay because that's the European model.
That's okay. That's perfectly good. But you have to create good communities and good spaces and all that other amenity that goes with living densely in a rented accommodation. And you have to depower the landlords so that they can't just be kind of chucked out, or continually put the rent up,
Yes.
And I think Shane he's doing an extraordinary job.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah, that notion of rent control, which is quite a thing in the big cities in the United States and certainly in Europe as well. That's one of the ways
in Europe,
of getting
Scandinavia,
around it. Yeah. And then also the realization that you and I have been around long enough to recall that back before 2000, housing stock in New Zealand rose at this kind of curve. So it was just this growth, but it was relatively flat. And then it was just directly post-2000, relaxing of lending rules in New Zealand and the Aussie banks going, oh, that's a market that hasn't had a massive appreciation in housing price, unlike Australia. And so they dumped not cheap, but much more available money into the market. And so I
bought my first one at $65,000.
Wow. Yeah, in Ponsonby.
Yeah.
And you had that.
That was my second house,
Yes. And you had that for 30 years, I think I recall.
Yeah. 35 years.
35 years. Remarkable.
And I made so much money. I made more out of that house with escalation than I made out of practice.
10x, right? Thereabouts.
Way more. But I won't go into it. But
No, I get it. And it was just through sitting on something. So my hypothesis is that the gains that we've had over that 20-year period, which was essentially, it worked out to be 7 years. You hold a home for 7 years, it would double in value, which is ridiculous and unsustainable, right? And so I think that the gains that have happened over time are probably not going to be projected out into the future because who's going to buy these houses? Because we don't have the depth of income available in New Zealand.
I think it's income. There's the big holder.
Totally. Then we've got the other problem, which is that it's expensive and hard to build. And so, we've got two tracks, and I think the housing price appreciation track has probably ended up where it's going to end up, and we're just going to go back to the 1 to 2%, 3% a year track inflation, maybe a little bit more than that kind of thing. I don't know, but that's my personal projection. We've got alternative assets investments. There's this big movement around going, if you invest at the S&P, which is
Yes.
7.2% per
Yes,
year, and if
exactly.
you just double down on that every
Yeah.
year and
Yeah.
you put
Yeah.
$10,000 of that in, then you will actually end up with way more in equity at the end of your life than if you owned a home
Yeah.
that you were
No.
reliant upon going up by
And
this amount.
exactly. And
That's
maintaining.
yeah, exactly. Maintaining, leaving it there. That's not my money. It's like the house. I can't sell it and then use it to go and buy a new pair of shoes or a trip overseas. Have that
Paul Smith.
discipline. Yeah, exactly. So let's go back to the building though. So I've bought and sold just for myself. I don't believe that one person should own multiple homes. I own commercial industrial property. I talk about that publicly. And so because you have businesses in there and I pay tax on that stuff, that's the way it should work. So personal opinion, not investment advice. And then, but the building thing, I've bought and sold maybe 7, 8 homes over the course of my life that I've all lived in all of them. And I've been put off building because of what you've talked about there. So talk me into building, talk me into engaging with an architect and building, Ken, because this is not just for me. This is for people that will be watching this who are like me, that are like, oh, that's hard. And the friends that I've had that have gone through it are like, nearly killed me, nearly broke our marriage up, that sort of thing. So talk me into it.
Yeah. So, we've got the counter to that. We've got so many clients that are so absorbed by the process and enjoy the process. At the end of the day, that's what we want is an enjoyable process and an enjoyable outcome at the end of the day. And we've got clients that we've done, 2, 3, 4 houses with, so they actually get on a roll with us. Some very good friends of ours, we've just finished their 3rd house. And they love the process and the outcome. And it's exciting because you get something that's unique and special and memorable that, ennobles the spirit, that empowers you. And that's the thing that we're always trying to embed into a home design. It's not a house. It's not bricks and mortar. It's an aspiration, and it's kind of something that comes from within. And so that's what we're always trying to tap into. And we're always trying to tap into this, slightly interesting, quirky, thinking beyond the square. What is the best way to solve that problem? Another little project that we did a few years ago was, we call it the hut on sleds. And it was a little house on the coastal erosion zone. So, it could be demountable. Or we just said, well, why don't we put it on sleds and we could move it? So, if we have an erosion problem, we can move it or we can take it off. And so it's actually cracking the nut or thinking something just outside the square. We did a house in Titirangi there a little while ago, and the design guidelines said it had to be blending in with the bush, the colours, and we chose to make it red, so that it actually was an enormous contrast. And the red against the green and the bush is just stunning. But it's kind of one of those things you don't really think about. So you end up with unique solutions, unique places to live in. We're also kind of motivated by the child in us. So we love, if we can, to have those spaces that are a little bit more engaging and interesting. We love bridges, we love towers, we love kind of, the interpenetration of space where you can look down and, high spaces. We like low, warm spaces in the wintertime. So, it's not the group house. It's not kind of just, a lot of architecture these days is a horizontal roof plane, and we've gone back to that modernism, a horizontal floor plane. We like sculpting spaces. We like kind of engaging with the senses a little bit more. A lot of houses these days are very, very simple, beautifully detailed, beautiful materials, but, they are what they are. We like a bit more complexity in our spaces. The journey is great, We've got so many people that love the journey. It is a little bit tricky at the moment with, the market at the moment is pretty tough. I just saw the other day, there's never been as many liquidations in the building industry ever. And that's kind of worrying because there's a great lot of knowledge that we're losing, as well as people's lifestyles and livelihoods. And, it's pretty tough out there. But we're hoping that house prices will come down as well. Just getting back to your other point, hoping that we can grow the cake of our country, our economy, and that's an investment in our kids and our kids' kids. And, you know, I do hope that we start thinking broadly about technology and AI and maybe getting away from, and I'm a dairy farmer, but, you know, dairy and tourism, and think about where the future is headed. And it's interesting, I was reading about the economy in Denmark, where they deliberately went away from an agricultural economy. They had a GDP about the same as us in the 1960s, and they went into tech. They are the biggest insulin producers in the world, and they've got a tech economy. And, you know, so what can we do best, and what has high value in it? And that will actually feed back into the country. We got one client that actually is a techie, and he's got all these boffins in a room that are doing tech stuff. And those are the things that I think we should be concentrating on, and leveraging the country, making it better for our kids so that we can actually bring that multiplier down to get into house ownership. Because there is, you know, while build to rent is great, it's a great model, if you can own it and shape your own destiny, how fabulous, especially with a unique built proposition. You know, so we still think that is the Kiwi dream. Let's see whether we can't bring that back again. But, you know, in the last 50 years, it's just pegged the other way.
Yeah, tech's an interesting one. It's been quite a boon for New Zealand over the last 10 years. If you look at the growth of it year on year, it's outpaced the growth of the economy, broadly speaking, but also the global tech economy. We've actually done super well. I had this conversation with a buddy, Mike Carden, in Sydney in 2019. At that stage, New Zealand had produced more unicorns, companies valued at more than $1 billion that were still private, than Australia had. Not per capita, they'd produced more. We rattled off at 11. Now that number's over 20, right? So we are punching above our weight. I had a good friend of mine, the global president of EO, Keeney, come on the show, and he was talking about Guatemala's first unicorn. We're over 20. Their economy is 5 times the amount of people, but half the size of ours from an output perspective. I think it was Latin America's first unicorn.
Wow.
So, Ken,
sorry,
we've wandered off on a bit of a tangent.
yeah.
I'm going to pull us back in here. We've talked about a range of different things. A icon of the architecture and the design and built environment in New Zealand. I can call you that.
Yeah,
again.
no, I certainly wouldn't say that.
House of the Year globally, some award-winning projects all over the place. You chaired the Architecture Council in New Zealand for a number of years.
Just the local branch.
Yeah. And so you've done some incredible things, and now the next chapter is coming along. You've brought on board a new business partner, and I can't wait to see how that's going to evolve for you over time. But there's an alternate Kenny, and he lives in a different universe, and he had a different career that wasn't being a bright light in architecture. What is that career?
I think I'll go back farming, become that dairy farmer.
Right.
My one cow, Misty, milk her every morning. That's it. I'd be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still have, there's something noble about, the agrarian sector. I grew up with it. My parents, my grandparents, on both sides, and I love it. Yes. As long as I could, have the theatre and have the movies and, have the cafes and have everything that the city offers.
Like a gentleman farmer, not far.
No. I'd want to be part of it as well.
You'd be milking.
Yeah, I'd be milking.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Maybe in Copper. Because that's close enough to the city.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love it. Ken, I'm so grateful for you coming on the show and for you sharing your wisdom and experience. Such a great story. And I look forward to kind of following progress from here.
Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Nice to kind of reunite again. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Ken.
See you, buddy.
Thanks so much for listening to the show. If you've gotten this far, I reckon you've probably enjoyed it. And there's more available for you in the form of my book, 2 Commas. It's available on my website, joshcomrie.com. I've done an Audible version, which is on amazon.com, and there's a Kindle one kicking around on either of those resources as well. I've had some wonderful, unsolicited feedback from early readers. They describe it as being punchy, clear, helpful, and actionable. What it's not is a guide on how to sell your company. You can go to ChatGPT for that. It's more insightful, experiential-based, and a bit of a blend of psychology, philosophy, and what it takes to build something meaningful, and what all that means afterwards. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you grab yourself a copy.